to say. But okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be presenting what we're about to present today. Not just because it's a really interesting piece of innovation in the HSE space, but because with the permission of an extremely involved and engaged and forward-thinking partner, we're going to be able to actually show you something real today as an output, which is extremely exciting. So Nathan Sider from LR's digital innovation team will introduce himself as we move through the presentation. But a little bit of background, I suppose. First of all, Doug introduced us at the very start of today's conference as problem solvers, and that's all well and good. But in order to understand problems, and in order to enable organisations from understanding those problems to realise opportunities, we have to be able to understand why those problems occur. And so it's no surprise that a large part of our organisation are forensically interested and focused on organisational root cause and on the things that organisations do to prevent those root causes from recurring, and from a leading indicator perspective as well on the things that organisations can do to make themselves more efficient, more safe, more profitable, and better generally at achieving the results that their hard work really deserves. So we've long since been in this space, and we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. We've developed processes and technology that help to support organisations in this particular space. But there was always something that was missing within this space that we wanted to really do some more work in, and that was this ability to harness technology that would allow the same approaches that we apply to human-led, if you like, qualitative investigation and assurance activity to the application of that on a mass scale, where we can begin to understand what organisational data is telling us and how we can act on that, hopefully while it's still in the leading indicator state, and therefore when root causes are dormant. And there's been a number of things that have kind of been happening in this space for a little while now. And I suppose the uniqueness of the piece of work that we're going to present today was that the outcome we wanted to get to would be able to trigger some indication around the presence and likely impact and likely behaviour of root cause. And I'm going to explain to you how we've gone about doing that. So that's the kind of backdrop to things. That's what kind of led us into this space. Lloyd's Register have long been a client of ours, a valued client, and are now a valued partner, an innovation partner, a developmental partner, and a commercial partner. And we're very, very proud to present this solution alongside them today. And I'll explain how that marriage essentially has worked. So what was the kind of problem statement that we had to work around here? Well, we've known, and Nick's presentation this morning teed this up brilliantly in terms of some of the things that the HSE are doing more broadly using similar Lloyd's technology platforms. We know that organisations at all levels of maturity gather and store large volumes of data, and we talk an awful lot these days about big data and big data analytics and what we're doing with big data, and we all wrestle with Power BI and Tableau and all of these other platforms to try and make sense of some of the things that our software platforms and our integrated systems are telling us. But the more the organisation does, the larger the organisation gets, the more complex the organisation gets, the larger these volumes of data get. And therefore, the more difficult on the face of it would appear it would be to understand what that data is telling us. And as a team of people who have very much learned this space from a qualitative point of view, ranging from those that have criminal investigation and industrial investigation experience, through to helping organisations analyse and understand hundreds of near misses, of incidents, of observations, how on earth do we turn that same maturity and that same set of intelligence on something that can analyse many thousands? And so the challenge is that this information is recorded because it's stored generally. Sometimes organisations do things with it, sometimes they don't. There are bodies set up in of course the UK Health and Safety Executive themselves, but specific industrial ones in rail construction, oil and gas, utilities. all sorts of industries where you'll find that there are companies and industries together that are beginning to accumulate all of this data. And typically it's in natural language description. So it comes in reports, it comes in observations, it comes in what we write down when we record near misses and incidents, and when we investigate, and when we do things that are proactive and that are very forward thinking to make our organizations more safe or more efficient. And of course that is also in different formats, different locations, and often too in different languages. So that's a bit of a challenge in itself. And of course, a qualitative human-led approach is never going to be something that can address that. You would be doing it till the end of time. It just would never come to a logical end. So unlocking the potential of that data was the challenge. If we can get into some of it, we only get a glimpse of a fraction of the insight that's hiding in it. You know, what are the underlying themes? Do we have systemic issues? Are there patterns, trends, indicators, ultimately root causes and latent dangers that, if we could identify through this big data analytics approach, would stop us ever sleepwalking into situations that will ultimately manifest themselves in consequence. Some of you will be familiar with the term risk profiling, where you're able to actually take a key high risk task or activity and have a full profile of that before you put a spade in the ground, or before you put a project plan into action, so that you can actually go and engineer these things out before they actually happen. So that's the problem statement. And working with safety leaders in multiple industries, we've begun to kind of understand where their pain lies. So how do they turn that into actionable insight? We know that it hides in descriptions, it hides in natural language, and we know that larger and more complex organizations find it very easy to lose the strength of signals that they're getting when they're digitizing processes. We talk a lot about APIs now and single truths and organizations that have systems that connect together. We know that in our world. We know that the software we develop for other people, or the software we develop for ourselves, has to ultimately be infinitely connectable now to all sorts of other things that create that strength of signal. Ultimately, there's more data than we can ever read, and often it's in a number of different silos and formats. For some, it's still sat in Excel and MS Word and things like that. For others, they have more complex platforms now, but ultimately the data is still sat in there. So digitization and transformation of digitization takes a long time in many industries and organizations, often for the right reasons, sometimes for the wrong reasons, but ultimately it does. That's a reality that we have to work around. And ultimately what we're trying to get to here is, how do we stop many of you who are in senior HSE positions from acting on gut feel when it comes to some of the investment decisions that you make in order to implement preventive actions properly, or do things proactively from a leading indicator perspective to keep your organization safe. So this is where the kind of human-led intelligence of what's gone before and machine-led intelligence of where we're going now has to come together. So if you didn't need to categorize the data, if you could get insight on demand, if you could track patterns in every new report that you add to something like this, and you could do it all at the click of a button, that's what success would look like for us. And that was the remit of the project here. And as Doug said in his introduction, what we're trying to get to here is a point where organizations, particularly those in complex supply chains or large organizations with complex structures themselves, have got this ability to listen at scale. In other words, as the organization evolves and its data accumulates, they get the ability to put a real ear into that and understand what that data is telling them. And it's really interesting because from a human-led investigation background, of course, the bigger it gets, the more difficult it is to manage. But actually in the world of natural language processing and machine learning, the more data, the better, and ultimately the more accurate the outcomes. So the two things actually marry really well together. So introducing what we've got now, it's called safety signals, and the intelligence is very much in the name. It's about helping organizations to identify strong enough signals within that large pool of unstructured HSE data, and indeed it could be applied to quality or environmental data or business data, to ultimately allow the organization to be much more confident about the decision making that it affects, and then after that decision making, to track the progress of the decisions that have been made. So the things that we're going to be able to show you today in this short demonstration is the ability to analyze and identify things like hazards, topics, and how they correlate, potentially severity and the potential of severity, and ultimately can we get deep enough to begin to predict the likely presence and strength and nature of root causes and root cause categories that exist within the data. We want to feed that obviously into parts of organizations to understand, well, is it something across the board? Is it something on asset A or asset B? Is it project A versus project B? How do we identify the hotspots that we need to go and focus our action on? How do we then plan that action in terms of creating appropriate preventive actions that have got a fighting chance of actually being successful, both in the short term and in the longer term? And then ultimately, have we got the ability within this platform, this dashboard, to track and measure the progress of those actions as we implement them? So that's no mean feat. You know, a year and a bit ago, when this became a real reality and when money started to be spent, it was a pretty daunting proposition to be able to try and get all of those things all lined up together, and that's what we're hopefully going to be able to demonstrate today. So just briefly for clarity, Safety Signals was born out of two partners who ultimately provided input and expertise, both around the machine learning platform that could be used to generate the insight, and in the power of an investigation, root cause analysis and preventive action platform and technology called Comet that would ultimately give the thing structure, give it intelligence, and allow it to go and begin to structure results in a way that organizations could understand and act on. So those were the primary power sources, but goodness me, they weren't the only power sources. And we owe huge thanks to actually 7 organizations, 6 who were existing client organizations who gave us data, crucially gave us Comet data as well, that we were able to go and do some machine learning with, in terms of teaching a machine a model and a series of models, working out what the blend of those models needed to look like in order to deliver the best results, but also just to give us insight into their world and how all of this stuff looks like in reality. And crucially, for the vast majority of that data, the investigation and incident reports that were analysed had been given that human layer of intelligence as well, which meant that we knew that the outcomes were statistically going to be stronger than just taking data from an unstructured approach. So there was real intelligence in the data that we were able to gather, and huge thanks to the sectors and the organisations that helped provide that data. And also as well, and I don't know if Nick's still in the call, but we must also thank the HSE, because we were still a little bit data light at the point that we'd taken the model as far as we could, and the HSE stepped in, and we anonymised many thousands of further records that we were then able to go and use to help complete the training of the models that we've got within the tool. So whilst there was 2 kind of primary battery sources, if you like, it was actually a much broader pool of organisations that enabled this to happen, and we're eternally grateful to all who were involved. So essentially what we're doing is we're gathering all of this unstructured data from different systems, historic, today, tomorrow. When this gets turned on, it's live and it organically grows, it organically takes more data in. Sometimes that comes from proprietary HSE management systems like Intellex, like Enablon, like Synergy Life, like AIRSweb, like EHS Insight, any of the players that you'll be familiar with out there. Often as well from, as I've said, more I suppose entry level data storage methods through spreadsheets and Word documents and other kind of sources of where natural language is stored. And what we do is we take that data. There's a very clever tool within the platform that will be demonstrated that goes and organizes and structures and even translates that data if it needs to get it into that kind of single version of natural language, that single version of truth. And then this ultimately is delivered via a continuous improvement and performance tracking dashboard that we're going to be able to demonstrate today, that actually shows you how your performance is and how it improves. And there are some other deliverables as well that we'll come back to, but that's the kind of flow of how this works. And as I said at the beginning, we're looking for a number of different things depending on how you want your dashboard structured. But obviously we're looking at topic clusters, so looking at things that are emerging which are going to be of significant interest from a subject matter perspective. Now, in the world of health and safety, that might be, as you can see in the examples there, around oven burns or release hooks or oil leaks or whatever that might be. In the world of quality, we'd be looking more in the field of non-conformances, but you get the idea, beginning to understand the topics that lurk within that natural language to establish whether the organisation has got visibility on them and whether they're doing them justice in terms of their responses. We're also very interested in severity, looking at the potential, as we are within our human-led approach, for SIFs, for events or near misses or circumstances that have got the potential to result in something much more significant and ultimately could lead to a serious injury or a fatality. So we've got the ability to look at severity as well. And then hazard mapping as well, and particularly of interest is the way hazards map to topics. So understanding what in the organisation is typically coming out in the natural language or in the supply chain in the natural language, which is leading to the topic clusters that we're beginning to understand. And then ultimately, can we get down to that depth of understanding why, moving that dial from the what to the why to say, well, we know what's happening here, but can we begin to predict a strength of signal as to why it's happening? And we've built a taxonomy that allows the machine to report back on that. So that's the kind of clarity through analytics that we're trying to achieve. Now, in order to build that intelligence, you have to have a taxonomy or taxonomies which provide that intelligence when you come and actually understand the data that's coming back out of the system. Now, we've worked long and hard in the space of incident investigation and root cause analysis, and we've got a number of things that we've learned about root causes and their behaviour. That means that you have to have a structured taxonomy in order to make sense of data on an organisational wide platform. Root causes never occur in isolation. There's no such thing as a silver bullet. So these clusters, these root cause habits, if you like, these correlations that happen, you need to understand them to get to the bottom of exactly why something is happening. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that root causes don't respect this hierarchy of seriousness. So you need to understand root causes across all of your exposure, low level, low consequence, low risk incidents and near misses and observations, in addition to those that had the potential to be something much more significant. So again, a fixed taxonomy enables you to begin to understand that volume when it's fed back to you. And thirdly, these root causes, they don't respect failure type. So everything you do in your organization changes depending on the types of things that you're protecting the business from. So, non-conformances and project failures are looked after with different policies, procedures, vendor management and controls and control measures than the risk of health and safety failure, which points much more at preventive and protective barriers and signage and PPE and fall arrests and all of those things. But the underlying root causes are the same. And so to get that value, that understanding right across the business, these taxonomies are very, very important. So the one that's built primarily into signals is called COMET. COMET deals with communication, operating environment, management, equipment and training. What we've established in years and years of research as being the organizational spectrum of root cause. And then layered into that are these second and third layers of potential signal strength. So the machine can look for the parent communication root cause, but it can also look then at written and verbal communication in terms of understanding a little bit more about the depth of signal where that root cause might lie. And then if you've got really good data and the machine's working very well on it, can we get into an even more granular view of what those root causes are, where we've got 62 coded and tagged root cause entries that sit relatively evenly distributed against those 5 categories. So it's helping you eat the elephant, but it's helping establish the strength of signal as you go deeper and deeper into these data sets. Okay, so the taxonomy is represented strongly in the dashboard that we're going to present, so you can see how the machine is presenting back some of the trends and some of the findings that it ultimately discovers. So what we're going to show is ultimately a model that allows you to be continuously listening. So when this goes live, it's live. Okay, it's not something that's a static report. You can run a static report from it. You can request a static report at any time. But ultimately, it lives and breathes as a dashboard that continuously is updated. You've got very simple tools to drag and drop data updates onto it, but ultimately it will continually feed you a live view of how your organization is performing in relation to the data that the machine is understanding, but more importantly as well, how ultimately it is performing in terms of what you're trying to do to make it even safer and even better. So the benefits of this being live are you can identify new clusters, new topics, new hazards, new potential root cause behavior as it emerges. But equally importantly, when you have identified something that's emerged and you're confident enough in the signal strength to go and do something about it, it will provide you with a means of actually going and locking in on KPIs and tracking to make sure that what you're doing in terms of the preventive actions that you're implementing are actually having an effect. Okay, so that's really, really important in this as well. Now, it's all delivered in a dashboard, and I'm very, very keen to hand over to Nathan to present what that dashboard looks like. But before I do that, I do want to say a special thank you to a global innovation partner of ours, McDermott. For those of you that don't know McDermott, they're an incredible organization, global organization in the construction, fabrication, marine operations space. They undertake massive, complex global projects all around the world, often operating out of large complex ports, which are of course of significant interest to both Lloyds and ourselves, and they do it very well. Safety and safety culture in the organisation is fantastic. Very rarely have I been to facilities around the world where it is literally plastered on the side of the buildings in the same way as it is with this particular organisation, and they really, really challenge the norms of health and safety performance all the time. We're delighted that McDermott gave us a substantial data set to be able to go and build out some of the dashboard material that you're going to see today, and that they will benefit on an ongoing basis from the platform and how it's set up to make sure that if anything is coming into view from a leading indicator perspective, they can actually go and act on it. So I don't know if you're still on the call at the moment, Mike, but thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the input and insight you've given us to build the product out to where it is today. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Nathan, who's going to take you through a live dashboard environment and show you some of the configurable and variable items that you can use within it. And then we're going to hand back briefly before the Q&A to explain to you exactly what a setup and a project looks like. Okay, Nathan, I'll hand over and I'll stop talking.
Thanks very much, Mark. Could I just check, Doug, that we're able to see the screen that I'm sharing at the moment?
Yep, that's all there,
okay.
Nathan. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Just to reiterate, Mark's word of thanks to McDermott for allowing us to share this demonstration that we built with their data set, and also thanks to everyone today for your time. What I want to do is provide a brief demonstration of the dashboard capability that we've built up in collaboration with SDC and CISO and the development partners that helped us with the data and with the insight. So what you're looking at on my screen at the moment is the dashboard. So this is the visualization of the insights that we've been able to derive. This particular dashboard is showing around 20,000 reports from McDermott. And the way we like to think of this dashboard is that it provides two layers of insight. So the first layer is through standard business intelligence classifications, such as we have a set of facilities or sites, which are the geographical locations that you can also see plotted as points on the map on the right-hand side. We have a set of report types that we've defined. So you can see there we've got near miss, injury. So this is fairly standard classification type data, as well as affected parties. Is it a customer? Is it a subcontractor potentially that's been involved in the incident? And then on top of that standard business intelligence information, we've used machine learning to build up 4 different lenses through which we can gain greater insight into the data. So the first of those is topic analysis. So we use a technique called natural language processing to read the text of each of the 20,000 incident reports and build out a set of classification topics so that we can immediately see the kind of topics that are arising from the data. So we have things like work areas, fall protection, crane operation, for example, are some of the ones that jump out at us there. So that's the topic lens, and we're able to correlate those topics directly with for example, hazards. So within LR and working with some of our development partners and our internal human factors team, we've developed a hazard taxonomy, which is effectively a classification whereby we can define an incident type by the kind of hazard it presents. So again, each of the incidents has been classified according to that hazard taxonomy. We've also, the biggest part of our collaboration with STC and CISO has been applying a proprietary COMET root cause classification to the data set. So we can see we have a set of 12 root causes, which we've applied to the data. And we can use all of these different parameters to cut and slice the data in different ways and understand the correlations between them. And the third control that you'll see on the navigation is a SIF or RIDDOR classification, which is really to do with severity. And this is something that we worked on very closely with the UK HSE and their analytics team. And we were able to train a machine learning model to predict severity of incidents. So that's the fourth lens that we're able to provide. So just to take you quickly through some of the components here. So first of all, we have a standard incident list. So we can, at a glance, we can see summary of a specific incident. So location plotted on a map, the nature of the report type, perhaps the project that it was in, that the incident was recorded against. As we draw down the page, we have a heat map. So I can, if I turn on the heat map function, I can see on the map where are my greatest concentration of incidents. So in this case, the points that are plotted on the map are sites or locations where these incidents have been classified or grouped. We have some marine clients where we're plotting, for example, the position of vessels on the ocean as they're moving around, or that could be any kind of facility or site. As we move down the page, we're able to see the root cause distribution across the body of incidents that we've looked at. So as mentioned earlier, this uses the COMET methodology. So we have communication, operating environment, management, equipment, and the final one is training. And within those, we have some sub-classifications. And this gives us immediately a flavour for the spread of root causes across the organisation globally. And on the right, we can see that how those root cause groupings are trending. So although individual human factors we can see represents the largest proportion of root causes for that organisation, the trend is actually down on that one. And the way that we work out the trending is we take the current date selection and we compare that to the equivalent prior period. Whereas we can see that the second highest root cause classification is around issues to do with task planning, and we can see that's actually on the increase. So that's one area that we might want to address. Linked to each of those root causes, we have some preventive action guidance, again, which is an input from STC as experts, and we can drill on that to see some recommended activities. So this correlates to the trends within the organisation, and we allow that to assign a priority to remediation or preventive actions that could be taken that would help with some of those root causes. Again, we have a similar representation for the hazards. So this is using our hazards taxonomy. So again, we have a similar view that shows us what are the hazards that are on the increase and which are on the decrease, and what kind of portion they represent of our incidents. And we also have a topic breakdown. So I'll just click into an expanded view of that one, and we can scroll down the list. So for each topic, these are all topics which have been drawn out of the reports by the natural language and the machine learning process. So we can see that there's a whole range of topics here that we've identified, and we can see which are on the increase, which have decreased recently. And again, this allows us to drill into those areas and start to understand where perhaps we need to focus some training or awareness. So just to show you how a typical user journey through this kind of environment, and how we can use the dashboard to derive insight and focus effort. I'm going to start with the the heat map at the top. So I can see I've got a cluster of incidents around this location near the Gulf of Mexico. So if I drill into that, I can click on each of these locations, and when I hover over each of these points on the map, I can see a count of the incidents in each of these locations. And if I click on that, I can immediately see the location of this facility is Houston, and I can see a representative sample of the incidents that have taken place within the selected calendar period for this date. So again, I can see this particular area, which I know is Hackberry, has about 2,500, and there's another significant volume in this location, which I believe is Port Arthur. So what I'm going to do is go to my facilities. I'm going to enter Port Arthur and select that. I'm also going to select Houston. And the final location that I'm going to select is Hackberry. Okay. And as we can see, the dashboard is now updating, and it will reflect a filtered view based on those locations that I've selected that have been suggested by the heat map. And as we can see, as we scroll down, the distribution of root causes has changed slightly, so that I can see in relation to these three locations, individual human factors and task planning are the key issues that I might want to track. And I can also see that some of the topics have changed and the hazards have changed in relation to those locations. So this is giving me a bit of a location lens. What I want to do next is, okay, so I want to have a look at these two primary root causes that I'm seeing. So I'm going to jump in here, individual human factors, and I'm also going to select task planning. It'll take a moment or two for the dashboard to refresh. Okay, so what we can see is at the top, what I've managed to do is build up a cluster of lenses or insights. So first one is based on just the statistical data, so location information, and on top of that, I've overlaid two of the primary root causes, which the dashboard is suggesting could do with some attention in relation to those tasks. What I can now do is save that as a tracker. So I'm going to call that root cause HA, PA for Port Arthur, and HAU for Houston. And I can save that cluster of metrics. So what we can see here is what we describe as a tracker capability. So we can see I've built up a cluster of lenses using a mixture of statistical data and machine learning suggested categorization. And I can see that I've got a lens which is showing me the last 3 months, 3 months prior to that, and where I want to be in 3 months' time. What I can then do is set some targets. So I can say, okay, perhaps I want no more than 20 incidents across those sites. I can add that as a value. And I'm also going to select a target for near misses. So I say, perhaps I want no more than 50 near misses. I could then update the tracker. And what we can see is that the data is flowing in from the past 6 months. So I can see how combination of incidents and near misses has been distributed over the last 6 months. What this is showing is a daily count, and the target in this right-hand pane in the forthcoming 3 months. The blue line that represents my target, and as we progress, and as Mark mentioned, this is intended to be used as a live and dynamic tool. So as we load in more data, we will see the distribution of those two metrics that I've decided to track, and I will see when I'm starting to get close to my target, and I can also plot some mitigating actions. So if I say on this timeline, Monday the 18th of October, I want to set, I'll just call it refresher training, and that could be any kind of HSE intervention that we might want to make to try and mitigate the risk. So I'm going to add that, and we can see immediately that preventive action has been plotted on the timeline, and what that will allow me to do is see how well potentially that training has impacted in reducing this set of root causes in these locations. So hopefully that's a fairly quick demo. I'm just mindful of time and I don't want to run over, but hopefully that's given you a little bit of a flavour. And at this point, I'm going to hand back to Mark to wrap up. So thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Nathan. That's great. Just give me 2 seconds. I will bring up slide deck again. Oops. Oh, don't want to leave. That wouldn't be a good idea, would it? See that okay, Doug?
Yes, you've got it there. It's good.
Okay, so just in terms of the kind of reality of how this works, then just to kind of close off and introduce an opportunity for some Q&A. Obviously, the effort in getting to this point is done. It's been a fantastic development project, and we've got some live work ongoing. But we've kind of fine-tuned this now in terms of how it works. So 3-month duration, 3 to 4 month duration is a kind of typical pilot. The way in which we go about that is to go and appoint those in organisations or collections of organisations that are interested in understanding something that maybe they don't understand at the moment. And it's important to say that this doesn't just operate within single organisation environments. It's quite normal for collections of organisations who don't compete, in particularly those that maybe are in utilities or something like that, where they all have a geography or a set of locations, but ultimately safety, improvement, and they have a means of collaborating. So that means we can deal with multiple organizations' data at the same time. So we appoint a group of stakeholders, tailor the requirements in terms of what they want the results to home in on, tune the models, and ultimately deploy on a secure cloud. We will nominate appropriate data sets. We take those in a number of different formats, and we tend to want to go to somewhere around 3 to 5 years in terms of history, if we can, to get a really complete picture of where the organization's been, where it's got to, and ultimately to give the best chance of beginning to signpost the things that might be coming ahead. And then in terms of deliverables in any piece of pilot work that we do, the live dashboard's available for 3 months. It includes some training and a fully configured analytics model and taxonomy. And within that, we produce monthly report findings as well. And then the other thing that we do, just to make absolutely sure that the results you're getting are ones that you can actually make decisions based on, we have a deep dive human-led validation model using Comet, where we'll take sample reports, we'll go and interpret them, reinvestigate them, work with the human beings that were involved in doing them to absolutely make sure that the results correlate or broadly correlate to what that human-led intelligence is telling you. So we're trying very much to validate this at the point we actually deploy it as well, to make sure that what you're getting is not skewed or is not going to result in organizations spending lots of money on something that wasn't ultimately accurate. So that's the kind of structure, typically 3 to 4 months, typically 3 or 4 data formats, and typically going back kind of 3 to 5 years into your history. And with pilot work so far, normally kind of half a dozen to a dozen stakeholders or nominated people within organizations that can come and have a close look at the dashboard and monitor it and manage it and administrate it, if you like, as the pilot program is delivered. So that's typically how we go about doing what we do. Okay, at this point, I think we'd probably like to hand back to Doug. And Doug, if you want to facilitate any Q&A,
yeah,
that'd be wonderful.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Nathan, for that. That is so exciting to see where this is at. It's amazing use of AI, in which to the end user you get the information you want, and you don't have to worry about how it's done. We've probably got a couple of minutes or so we could devote to any sort of quick questions or points that anyone wants to raise for Nathan and Mark in this whole area. If anyone wants to pick up on anything there, either in terms of understanding a little bit more about how it does this or how it could be applied, feel free to grab a hold of the mic again. Okay.
Oh. a shire bunch this afternoon. Oh, here's one.
Here we go. Yeah, carry on. Please go ahead.
Hey, Bertie.
Hey, Mark. Just a quick question in terms of like numbers. Obviously, within our business, we've just about 55, 60 incidents in the space of like 18 months, give or take, being the size of business. So to get the true benefit of this, as we've just had the demo from Nathan, are we talking, hundreds to get it worthwhile, or what kind of incident numbers are we talking about?
So crucially, Berju, we're not talking about only incidents. Incidents with consequence, thankfully, are relatively rare in most organizations versus the collection of HSE data that they accumulate. So we're actually talking about the natural language that resides in all of the HSE communication that you do. Now, I know from working with you personally that one of the things that you have to do every month is all the close call and near miss and observation data that goes back to the RSSB in the rail construction space. You imagine the volume that accumulates in that data in a month-on-month, year-on-year basis. So the model is very much tuned towards making sense of data at scale. So it's not just incident reports per se; it's all of the stuff that would have HSE language or communication within it. So that's observations, close calls, it's near misses, it's incidents, it's even reporting that you do in projects. It's anything where natural language is potentially indicating trends or topics or hazards or correlations that you want to get after.
Okay, brilliant. That's definitely got mileage then for us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bertie. Thanks. And Tony, you can come along to any of our conferences anytime. On you go.
Well, I like to get value for money. I guess it's a question for both. So I think I mentioned previously that we're already adopting Power BI, but I don't think it's as advanced as what I've just seen there. So one, interested in the software platform that's been adopted there, but also want to have a conversation, because as a healthcare provider, a lot of our instant activity is generated by our patient population within a mental health service. Now, that can be prevented, but that's a difficult task. So it's not your traditional health and safety compliance issues. It's what people do to themselves. However, it would be useful to test some of the scenario the way we've done it, because we report something like 60,000 incidents a year as an organisation. Yep. And then multiply that up through healthcare, where you're talking about millions and millions. And that's the challenge that we'll have about healthcare to learn. So starting from Phil's conversation this morning about what goes wrong in healthcare and what can be prevented, I'm really interested to explore some of your methodology about machine learning and things like that, because we've already started to adopt the stuff from Power BI about where it'll ask itself questions and give you the answers about how many, where, why, what, when. But it's really just about exploring to see if there's any opportunities we're missing.
I can perhaps jump in on that one. So,
yep.
So I think certainly there's some of the lenses that we showed and talked about today may be applicable in a given use case, and others may not. But I think that, for example, the topic analysis, where really what we're doing is scanning the free text of the reports and allowing the machine learning process to come up with different to suggest key areas of focus and topics and themes that are arising, and allowing you to drill into those. I think that's a fairly universal capability, and that could run on any data set. And with all these things, the larger the amount of data, the better the machine learning engine performs. So I think that would be one area that we could perhaps investigate. And in terms of the technology, I think the way that we would differentiate the tool that we've just been looking at from something like Power BI is that Power BI is very good at building dashboards and interrogating statistical data. What it won't do is derive those additional layers of insight through machine learning and things that are perhaps not exposed through the more statistical means. So the deeper insights that are actually hidden in the text is something that where we believe that this tool will differentiate us.
Can I ask then, on that basis, can there be a bridge built between the two? So we still use Power BI and there's a relationship about that analytics from your system into that?
Yes, so the tool that we're looking at today is built to sit on top of any existing capability that you already have. So it's not competitive, it's complementary. I didn't have a chance today because of time reasons to show you how the data comes in, but there's a very straightforward drag and drop mapping process, and we can take data either through an exported file such as a spreadsheet or CSV, or we can also connect directly to any existing systems or databases if that were preferable. So there's a lot of flexibility, and the system is designed to be complementary.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Yep, thanks, Tony, and thanks, Mark and Nathan.